We remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than to individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. A speaker may speak once during each comment period. There are 2. Please note that these sessions are designated for comments to protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community. The board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals, such as students or district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrator, or to communicate with the board privately by sending an email to board@pennridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time. At this point, do we have anyone who would like to address the board? If not, we will move to the consent calendar. Consent calendar tonight consists of items A through H as listed on the agenda. Do we have any of those items that board members would like to vote on? H on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Krause. And a second? Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Well, moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Comments or questions from board members? Not? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Next, we have the student, or we do not have tonight, the student liaison report. Hopefully we will have a student liaison join us at the September meeting. In terms of the president's report, I can tell you that tonight we have 3 new right-to-know requests. They amount to $586 approximately, and a small amount of money is still outstanding for previous invoices. Second thing is the safety committee update. Do we have a report from either Mrs. Burkholder or Mr. Lockwood, or both?
We continue to look at additional trainings for the district, and we had 8 staff members from the district move into Quakertown's regional office, and we were trained in family reunification, which will be looking at a program for our district, as well as one of Pennridge regional officers attended the program and training with us. So at this time, we're going to be continuing to look at how we're moving forward as a Pennridge safety and security program, and we'll be updating that in the upcoming months. Thank you.
Good evening. So during the summer, we don't hold safety committee meetings. Our next meeting will be September 13th. Hope everybody enjoyed their nice warm summer.
Thank you. The other thing that I'd like to touch on briefly tonight is the infamous or famous Pennsylvania budget. As I'm sure everyone knows, we finally have a budget. I want to thank Mr. Daubert for sharing the PASBO webinar that he attended. There was a lot of useful information there that wasn't printed in the paper after the budget actually got passed. And I think some of that's important, that there were 4 specific bills that finally were passed, individually a spending and a revenue bill, a school code bill, which makes some changes to the school code that we obviously have to be aware of, and the fiscal code bill, which tells the state how it must distribute the money to various districts. The general fund budget will be $31.6 billion this year for this Commonwealth. That includes a $200 million increase for basic education funding, a $20 million increase for special education funding, and a $30 million increase for early childhood education. Those are pieces of the good news. If you look at the basic education formula, it is quite complex. That's not a new thing, but it involves multiple factors, some of which are additive and others of which are multiplicative, which makes it pretty complicated unless you're really a full-time mathematician. It was interesting to see they noted this PASBO webinar who the winners and losers, so to speak, were in terms of the basic education funding. If you look at the winners, they tend to be South Central districts from places like York, Lancaster, Lebanon County. Only one local district, Upper Marion. Most of you know that it's the King of Prussia Mall. They happen to get a pretty sizable increase, about 8.3% according to this. On the other side of the coin, most of the quote losers, the people who didn't get large increases, came from the southwestern part of the state, basically the poorer areas around Pittsburgh. The only local district there was Bryn Athyn. I don't know how many of you know, but Bryn Athyn is a school district without schools. It's a very small school district in southeastern Montgomery County, and they send all their students to other school districts. So not surprising they didn't get a lot of extra money. And then the same is true, or at least similar things apply to the special education formula, which is quite complex again and has winners and losers. Perhaps most interesting to this area would be that one of the least large increases was the Palisade State School District, our neighbors to the northeast. There are certainly interesting issues when you look into the revenue that they're working with. There's a lot of recurring debt revenue. I call that the sin taxes because that's mostly what it is. Things on smoking and similar lottery and various things. And then there's non-recurring revenue, which is perhaps an even more uncertain kind of thing, including things like money from the tobacco settlement and the Volkswagen settlement, a lot of things that are one-time, not recurring things. So in many ways, the budget is good news in that we got more money than was originally anticipated and the whole harmless, but it's bad news, I think, in terms of the fact that I believe, and I don't want to put words into Mr. Daubert's mouth, but I believe he would consider this a structural deficit issue still with the state, which means that next year, who knows what we face. The good news, hopefully, is that we will not see a large PSERS increase, or at least not as large increase. But I think the bad news is that the state will still have difficulty balancing their budget. And whatever they do, we aren't given that option. We have to pass the budget and put it through before the end of June. So that's my report, and I will hand it over to the superintendent.
Great, thank you, Dr. Yarnell. First, I'd like to thank everyone who worked hard this summer to ensure that we are ready for a start. The teachers were here today setting up their classrooms. They will be in service training the next couple of days. So special thanks to all those who worked in a variety of capacities. People always wonder what we do in the summer, but we never wonder what we do because we are busy. So great staff, and I thank them all. Next, I'd like to thank the Pennridge South Middle School Parent Group, the South Communication Network, for a donation of $1,310 to purchase a Red Cat sound field for the school. Next, we have our Takes Pride. Once again this year, we will be reinforcing social and emotional learning skills throughout the district with our students. And we will have a theme of the month, a quote of the week, and a blurb of the day. So September's Takes Pride theme will be trustworthiness, and students will be reminded that trustworthy people are those worthy of their confidence and they are reliable. They can be counted on to do what they say they will do. A couple of points of pride this evening. For the third year in a row, our men's soccer team has been recognized by the National Soccer Coaches Association of America for academic excellence. To qualify for the award, the team must have a minimum grade point average of 3.25 for the entire academic year. The team GPA is determined by adding every player's GPA, then dividing by the number of players. And even though he didn't qualify for the finals because of an unfortunate but legal bump that knocked him off course, we are proud of Matt Baranowski, a member of the class of 2011 who represented the United States in the Summer Olympics as a member of the U.S. cycling team. That is my report. Dr. Yarnell.
Thank you. At this point, we'll move to committee reports. The first is activities. Mrs. Yarden.
The Activities Committee hasn't met since our last board meeting, and our next meeting is scheduled for September 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. And curriculum. The like what the agenda says, there's a last minute change here. The next curriculum committee meeting is scheduled actually for September 14th, 2016. We will be joining the other activities, policy, and personnel meetings that night. The good news is that there will be one less board meeting. The bad news is the board meeting that we will have, it will be a bit long, the committee meeting will be a bit longer. But that is now scheduled for September 14th. Facilities, Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Dr. Yarnell. I have one motion tonight. The motion is motion to approve Breslin, Ridyard, Federo Architects to perform a building utilization study at a cost of $26,000 plus a maximum of $1,000 for reimbursement costs.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Mrs. Cullen, moved by Mrs. Schmidt, seconded by Mrs. Cullen, to approve Breslin, Ridyard, and Federo Architects to perform the building utilization study. I would note that this was on the agenda for the July meeting. We did not have enough board members to pass it that night, so it's reappearing tonight. Are there any other comments or questions from board members? Not? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 8-1. Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. The next Facilities Committee meeting is scheduled for September 7th.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Casper?
Thank you. There are three motions tonight. The first motion is to approve the contracts listed under 1A. Both these 1A has been reviewed and approved by the solicitor.
Do we have a second to the motion to approve the BCIU 22 Special Education Service Agreement?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Moved and seconded to approve the agreement. Comments or questions for board members? Mrs. Burkholder, I do have actually two questions. One is, how large is this relative to the previous year? And the second is, I gather we've done the reconciliation or not for last year?
So this is with an increase of a little over $200,000, and that's based on a new enrollment with students coming in. We also have students registering at this time as well. So as students leave, other students may go. We've also increased from 0.6 behavior analysts for the district last year to 1.6. And that's so that we can begin to look at returning some of our students that are with emotional disturbances or autistic support services outside of the district to begin to prepare our district for those facilities, making sure that our behavioral supports are intact. We're looking at the reconciliation right now. We have received bills and we're getting those, but that will be some time. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from board members? Not? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Casper?
The second motion is to approve student activity accounts as listed 2A through D.
Do we have a second to approve student activity accounts?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gromo. Moved and seconded to approve the student activity accounts. Comments, questions from board members? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Casper?
Third motion is motion to approve contract as listed change in bus driver physical amount due to a typographical error on the July 25th, 2016 board agenda. 3A.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded to approve the change in Dr. Davis's contract. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Casper?
Thank you. The next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for September 7th, 2016.
Thank you. The intermediate unit, Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Yarnell. We did not meet, but I do have a couple items I want to express. I'd like to express a hearty thank you to all those who contributed supplies to the IU's Fill the Van campaign. As a reminder, this campaign is designed to equip families who are experiencing loss of income due to homelessness, jobs, sickness, etc., to supply them with school supplies that they cannot otherwise afford for their children. Because of the generosity of our board directors, Dr. Yarnell, Mrs. Yardley, Mr. Bergomo, and the administrators, my husband and I delivered 7 full boxes of supplies to the William Tennant High School today. So thank you again, and a special thank you to Ms. Burkholder for collecting 6 boxes of supplies from the administrators and sorting them. So Dr. Hoffman was very excited when he saw it. As a matter of fact, it was fill the Ada Miller van before we got to fill the IU van. So it took 3 of us to unload the boxes. So again, thank you everyone for your generosity. I was overwhelmed, they were overwhelmed. Today as well, at William Tennant marked the opening day of the 2016-17 school year, which was they had 2 different programs. The morning program offered recognition of many BCIU employees and annual award winners, and we enjoyed an inspirational speech by Adam Blank, a graduate of the Intermediate Unit No. 1 in Pittsburgh. Mr. Blank is an individual with albinism, autism, vision, and speech impairments, and he is making this his career, motivational speaking. And I have to say his funny bone is definitely functioning beautifully, so it was an adventure. Lastly, in the previous month's report, I mentioned the IU is working with the Neshaminy School District to run a newly vacant elementary school, which will serve as an early learning center for students and families across Bucks County in the Head Start, Early Head Start, and Early Intervention programs. Dr. Hoffman shared the good news this week. The Neshaminy Board approved the agreement, and work is already underway to prepare the school for the first days of school. So it's going to be a Herculean effort. The next meeting is scheduled for September 20th at 7:30 at the IU location in Doylestown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Moving to the next item, the Personnel Committee, Mr. Regomo.
Thank you, Dr. Yarnell. Personnel Committee has 2 motions. The first is a motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to terminate the employee of number 816 effective August 25, 2016 in accordance with section 5-514 of the school code and for the reasons set forth in the statement of charges contained in a letter from the superintendent to employee 816 dated July 21, 2016.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Yarden. Moved and seconded to approve the recommendation of the superintendent for termination of an employee. Comments or questions from board members? If none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Mr. Regomo?
Thank you. The second motion is to approve an addendum to staffing agreement between the Bucks County Intermediate Unit and the Pennridge School District to provide the services of a qualified individual to serve as an acting subject area supervisor for the interim period of time. Original agreement reviewed by solicitor.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you. Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded to approve the addendum to the staffing agreement between the BCIU and the Pennridge School District. Comments or questions from board members?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Yarden.
It says it's extended until June 30th, 2017, so I'm wondering, do we plan on using it for that long? And if not, is there a way to end it before that?
I can speak to the second part of your question, and the answer to that is yes. The original agreement provides that the agreement and any extension of the agreement can be terminated on 30 days' notice. As to the administration's plan, I can't speak to that, but it is terminable relatively easily.
And we're obviously trying to fill the position as soon as possible with the best qualified candidate, hopefully sooner than later.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this particular item? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-1. Mr. Gilman?
The next personnel committee is scheduled for, the next meeting is scheduled for September 14, 2016.
Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. You've swelled our ranks immensely. We'll get to you in a moment. Please bear with us. We're moving to the Policy Review Committee. Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Anel. I have one motion to approve revised policy number 008, organizational chart.
We have a second to the motion to revise the organizational chart. Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Moved and seconded to approve this motion to revise policy 008. Comments or questions from board members? I have a question. Who's going to update this since it changes frequently?
Our office can do that, myself and Mrs. Cron. Right,
Thank
in
you.
fact, I think you just received probably another copy
Yes.
today because we now know some of the names of these psychologists.
Change is already underway, right?
Yes, yes, so it's a moving document, it sure is.
Yes, it surely is. My private employment experience was that it's not only a moving document, it's one that's almost always out of date and very frustrating in that sense, at least when you're doing an audit or anything like that. Any other comments or questions from board members on this motion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Mrs. Miller?
Thank you. The next policy review committee is scheduled for September 14th.
Thank you. And please continue with the Upper Bucks County Vocational School.
Thank you. We met on August 18th. The collective bargaining agreement between the Upper Bucks County Technical School and the ESPA, SEA, NEA was approved and is effective through June 30th, 2019. Operation of the 2016-17 Carl D. Perkins federal grant of $121,274 was approved. The amount, which is $8,000 less than last year, is based upon a complicated formula using the state's population and age and needs to be applied for yearly. Enrollment at the Upper Bucks Technical School for the 2016-17 school year currently totals 729 students, showing an increase of 36 students from the 2015-16 school year and 136 students from the 2015-14 school year. Most of the programs are fully enrolled, and some programs have a waiting list, so we're doing very nicely up there. A candidate for the position of Adult Education Coordinator was approved as Upper Bucks moves forward with the development of an adult program which will focus on providing adults with the necessary skills to meet the needs of our local employers and workforce. The next meeting is scheduled for September 15th at 7:30 p.m. and located at the Upper Bucks Technical School location.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller? Technology, Mr. Kraus.
Thank you, Dr. Yarnell. The Technology Committee has not met. Next Technology Committee meeting is scheduled for September 19th, 2016.
Thank you.
I just have a question about that, because you moved, that's the night, the curriculum meeting and the technology were together. So we're still having the technology on the 19th?
Yes, 14th seems a little crowded.
Yes. As it turns out, I'm going to be in Boston the night of the
Okay.
19th, which is why I asked that that meeting be changed.
Okay.
So yes, technology is still on the 19th, and we will move to Act 48. Mrs. Banis Clemens?
The Act 48 committee has not met since our last board meeting, and the next meeting is scheduled for October 6th.
Thank you. Ad hoc fundraising. Mrs. Schmidt, Mrs. York?
Ad hoc fundraising committee did not meet, and the next meeting will be scheduled as needed.
Thank you. The Pennridge Area Coordinating Committee. Mrs. Banis Clemens?
The PAC committee has not met since our last board meeting, and we are scheduled to meet on September 22nd.
Thank you. That completes the committee reports. Dr. Radigan, I presume you have the next item? Yes. Yes, the presentation.
We don't know where our
He is a
guest of
conscientious
honor
worker,
is.
so I don't. Nick is very conscientious about his work. He might be really busy. I don't know.
Well, I think since we have the group here, we should still move
Yeah,
forward.
yeah.
I'll go down with Mrs. Schmidt to the podium.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, as you notice, the football team is here with us tonight, so what's always great about the team, they truly are a team. They come to us as a group and stick together and do wonderful things. You may remember, board members, that back in the spring, they helped the life skills class with their gardening. So they have many, many talents and many skills, but they definitely show a lot of our Takes Pride themes.
of working together, showing kindness and empathy, and tonight is definitely an example of that. I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Schmidt from the Football Boosters Club to make this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Radigan. Last fall, I believe, it was brought to the attention about Mr. Nick Sinako, one of our janitors here in the high school building, and he annually makes a trip over to the Ukraine, which is where he grew up. He travels with a group of doctors, volunteers, and they go over there and they work in children's hospitals over there. It's all time that is given from the doctors. They work in the operating rooms. Nick actually goes into the operating rooms and he will translate for the American doctors that are there. A lot of them, he's shown us pictures. It's children that have accidents. They live on farms. They don't have a lot of health care readily available. He makes this trip every year. Approximately, his cost is about $1,400. He pays that out of his own pocket every year. It's his vacation to him. So when the Booster Club heard about this last year, we wanted to do something for Nick because he does so much for these boys. Every week, the day before the game, the Booster Club and all of the families do a team dinner in the cafeteria here. Nick's there every week, sets up the cafeteria, the boys come in, they have their dinner, and he's there to clean up, get them anything they need. Friday nights after games, he does the same thing. He's there in the high school at the locker room when the team returns so that we can, as a Booster Club as well, do what we do for the boys, which is, again, feed them. It seems that that's a lot of what we do. So in return, we had set up in the spring a GoFundMe site to collect funds to help pay for Nick's trip for this year. So we were hoping that he'd be here, but as Mr. Ferry said, he takes his job very seriously and is very diligent. So on behalf of the Booster Club, myself, Mrs. Henry, and Mrs. Yeager, and the whole entire team and the staff, we have $1,000 to present to Nick to help to cover his costs for his trip this year. So I believe he will be leaving sometime in September. I believe that's about the normal time that he usually goes on this trip over there. So it's really an amazing thing that he does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Schmidt. Thank you to the team, and best of luck this year. Any items that are old business? If not, new business. Thank you. The first item under new business is voting for the PSBA officer election. This is forthcoming. It is required that we do so before October 3rd. This will actually be on the September board meeting agenda. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's board members' attention tonight so that you can take the time to look into who you would like to select as the officers for PSBA. Mrs. Cullen and Mrs. Miller will be representing us at the meeting in mid-October, so they will get to meet this gentleman or lady, as the case may be. I don't recall who exactly is standing for the elections, but in any case, this is something that we do on a yearly basis. So this is just a heads up for the next meeting. Any other new business? If not, we'll move to announcements. The next regularly scheduled school board meeting is to be held on September 26, 2016 at 7 p.m. in this room here at the high school. There were super executive sessions held on July 13th, on the 17th, and there will be one tonight as well for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent's performance throughout the last year.
Can you repeat that, please?
An executive session will follow tonight's meeting for the discussion of the terms and conditions of employment of a number of district employees, as well as the labor and arbitration matters. As I mentioned, the super executive session will follow tonight's meeting for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent's performance. Dr. Renner, do we want to make a formal presentation now that the honoree is here again?
Sure, Mr. Schmidt, you want to come back down? We're getting our
Get your
exercise.
exercise in tonight.
Yeah, let's have the captains, or the seniors. All right, let's do seniors. Seniors, come on over here, please. Be about 20. Let's see if the public.
Put a row in front on your knee, one thing to do on the front, maybe 5, 6 guys in the front. I want that in the front.
Keep backing up. Yeah. Good.
In the front.
That's good.
Nick?
Come on, Nick.
Where's Coach?
I'm here.
Okay, come up to the front.
You want me to get in
And,
front?
Your hand. Check.
Yeah.
It's not bad, it's not bad.
Yes,
Just gotta tighten up All right, Jeff, you and Nick are going to get between the two guys. Great, here we go. 1, 2.
I got the same.
One more. Hold on. Good.
Let's give a round of applause. Thank you.
To finish our agenda, public comment. Mrs. Herring.
Good evening, Diane Herring, Hilltown Township. Just a quick question about the EDR report. I noticed something on here I'd never seen before. It's about halfway down. It's a non-athletic position. Football game refreshment stand coordinator number 2. Does that mean that there are 2 of them? And what exactly is this position? Because I've never seen it ever before in an EDR report.
Mrs. McHale.
It would be part of the EDR contract. It would be one of the listed items on the EDR contract in the CBA.
Okay, I have a copy of the most recent one, and that one's not there.
I'm not sure why they have it listed as two.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Furlong.
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. You mentioned earlier the budget from the state and the different funds. In the newspaper, and maybe it was not a complete reckoning for Pennridge, it appeared that this district received an additional, I'm going to say $475,000.
Something on that order.
Was that the net, or is there something to be deducted from that?
Mr. Daubert, can you answer that question?
No deduction from that.
Okay, in that case, you mentioned, some district was a big winner with an 8%, and I think that our amount put us around numbers 3%. However, that is a substantial sum of actual dollars, $474,000. I mean, that's $500,000 you got under your belt now that I don't think you necessarily budgeted or knew about. Did you budget that amount?
No, it was not budgeted, but if you recall, our budget was passed at a deficit of about $878,000, so that $475,000 cuts that in half.
Okay, that would be my question is, I think that you would do the community a service to discuss the fact that you have benefited by $474,000 and the approach that you're going to take with that money. Mr. Daubert, this has not been voted on by the board, believes that it will reduce our deficit. I don't know that that's a fact because I haven't seen the board make any kind of a vote as to how they would like to treat those proceeds. Do you want to reduce that? Is there a one-time expenditure that you want to take care of? Did you want to put it in reserves? I don't know what you're going to do with it. I think that the Pennridge public has a right to know when you receive $474,000 unexpectedly, how that will be dispersed. And so I'm requesting that you give us some insight as a board.
By law, it has to become part of the general fund budget and enter the budget as a revenue, and it will lower the budgetary deficit, like I said.
I understand that it goes into the general?
It is a revenue in the budget.
As a revenue.
Yes.
But it is found money, and I would like to hear from the board that they agree with you that it will only be used to reduce the deficit. Because there are other ways that they can spend that money. They can keep that deficit and spend it on something else.
The board already passed a budget for the fiscal year. So
I would like to hear it from the board, Mr. Daubert. No disrespect. It is a board decision how to spend that money.
Mrs. Furlong, as you know, every year we pass a budget with a great deal of uncertainty from the state. This year's no different. Every year there's a difference in the amount of money versus what we project. Mr. Daubert and his predecessors have all projected very conservatively, which I approve of. I think most of the board members also approve of that. So it's not unusual to have some extra money when the state finally decides in its infinite wisdom to pass a budget. I mean, we're required to pass a budget before the end of July, before the end of June. They can pass the budget whenever they choose, as has become obvious in the last 2 years and even before that. So, and putting it in and taking it out of reserve, a budget is a framework, in my opinion. And every year there are unexpected requirements that we pass and some that we don't spend. So I think I certainly agree with Mr. Daubert's answer.
Which was what?
Which was that he was going to reduce the structural deficit that the budget incorporated.
And what is a structural deficit?
Something that is not, revenue and expenditures are not in alignment.
Okay. All right.
So you take it out of fund balance. Basically, it's taking something out of fund balance somewhere.
And you don't I agree with what you said, that generally speaking, a conservative budget is a wise way to do it. And normally, the board does receive, hopefully, either the same amount that was budgeted or slightly more. This is not slight. This is $500,000. And that's why I think that you sort of glossed over it as if we received an extra 20 or an extra 50 maybe, but we received $500,000. And that's why it concerns me. I just wanted to know, and if that's the board's decision, I think that's great.
I don't believe this is the first time we've discussed the amount of money that the state had added. You may not have been here for it, but we have discussed this before.
Can I, excuse me, that's actually what I was thinking, may I?
Yes.
When Dr. Yarnell announced it, I just pulled up the agenda because I remember having a conversation about this, that we knew we were going to get some extra money, we didn't know what it was going to be, but I think Mr. Daubert announced that night what his intent would be for that money. And if you want to know, I'll speak only for myself, but yes, I agreed with what Mr. Daubert proposed.
Is that in the minutes?
I would have to go back and look. I do not know.
What meeting was that discussed in? I've only missed one board meeting that I'm aware of.
Well, it could have been any time after the budget would pass. So it could have been the Finance and Facilities in July. It could have been the July 25th board meeting. It could have been the special board meeting on July 13th. So those are the three meetings that it might have occurred at. I can't tell you which.
Well, I'll look in the minutes.
That's fine. Okay, anyone else? If not, press comments, questions? If not, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.